The 1970s. These were the days when high-performance muscle vehicles first burst onto the scene. At that time, the name of the game was horsepower, and the more grunt, the better. And more grunt meant more cubic inches and more horsepower. In today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the baddest muscle cars of the 1970s, the 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS LS6 454, also known as pure muscle. We're going to be discussing everything from engine type to torque, transmission type, 0 to 60 time, and dimension. If ever there was a poster child for the muscle car, then this car is probably it. Muscle cars are known for creating tire smoke, and it's safe to say that the 1970 Chevelle SS was a pro at it. This tire-shredding monster could do 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.1 seconds and can cross the quarter mile in under 14 seconds. That's some crazy power for a 1970 vehicle. These numbers enable the 50-year-old Chevelle to keep up with the most modern muscle cars. Do you want to learn more about the most powerful muscle car Chevelle has ever produced? Do you want to know what it's like to ride in one of these bad boys? Then stick around until the end of the video as we take a closer look at this car. Although there is still controversy around which car was the true first muscle car, it is indisputable that these high-performance vehicles first appeared in the 1960s. A muscle car's formula was simple: a front-engined, rear-wheel drive configuration with a huge block, preferably a rumbling V8. Back then, having a sinister-sounding V8 was the major criteria for turning heads and flaunting your muscle, and the 1970 Chevelle SS fit this description to the letter. In the hierarchy of the street, circa 1970, there were the big dogs, and then there was everyone else. At the Spotlight Grand Prix, even 400 cubic inches under the hood just wasn't enough anymore. The name of the game was grunt, and the more grunt meant more cubic inches and horsepower. The old saying, "There's no substitute for displacement," was never truer in 1970 when Chevrolet's SS Chevelle sat on top of the muscle car food chain. Not just any SS 454 with its 360 horsepower, but the RPO Z15, the King Kong of the bow tie brigade. When the muscle car market exploded in 1964, Chevrolet was caught off guard. The Pontiac Le Mans established the standard by including a 389 cubic inch Bonneville engine. At that time, Chevrolet's biggest engine for the new Malibu was 327 cubic inches. The Z16, a 396 cubic inch, 375 horsepower variant with just 201 produced, was the first big block Chevelle to debut in 1965. The SS 396 was introduced as an option on the Chevelle in 1966 to compete with the GTO, selling 72,272 units versus Pontiac's 96,946. The 396 engine remained the only option for the SS 396 through 1969, with 3 horsepower packages available: standard 325, optional 350, and optional 375. GM raised the intermediate engine ceiling to 400 cubic inches for its 1970 models, and the 4 divisions producing muscle cars immediately dropped their largest engines. Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac chose to go with 455 cubic inch engines, while Chevrolet chose to roll out a 427 to 454 cubic inch engine. The LS6 used the same block as the LS5, but the Rochester Quadra Jet was swapped out for an 800 CFM Holley 4-barrel mated to an aluminum manifold. The LS6 had 4 bolt mains, a forged steel crankshaft, and forged aluminum connecting rods with 11.25 ratio 1 compression pistons. Deep groove supplementary drive pulleys were required due to the LS6's high redline 6500. The LS6 was hampered by the archaic air injection reactor, AIR, pump installed into the tops of the exhaustive manifolds that pump more air into the exhaust system due to the new federal pollution rules. The products of incomplete combustion, hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide, were decreased as a result, and further combustion took place in the manifold and exhaust pipe in the presence of oxygen-rich air. Only the Holley-equipped LS6 got the AIR system, which was one of the first things owners took out when they got their car from the dealer. While the rest of the world was fighting to break the 200 horsepower barrier, North American engineers were giggling and playing with numbers that were more than double the size. The Chevelle LS6 was a true behemoth of a car, with some option packages costing nearly as much as the car itself. Starting at roughly $2,800 for the base car, the Big Daddy RPO Z15 SS 454 package, as advertised in the brochure, required an additional $988.55 minimum. Yes, the bare minimum. If you really wanted to go all out on the specific sheet, there were plenty more alternatives to choose from. Customers who purchased an LS6 Chevelle were required to purchase mandatory options, which were not cheap. Bright engine accents, dual exhaust with bright tips, black painted grille, wheel opening moldings, power front disc brakes, unique rear suspension, and F70 14 tires on 7-inch rims were all part of the $503.45 RPO Z15 SS 454 package. A black insert was added to the rear bumper, while the SS received a power bulge hood UPR front. The base 360 horsepower LS5 with heavy-duty battery was also included in the bundle. Buyers could also choose an RPO LS6 454 engine for an extra $236.30, and either an M22 $221.80 or M40 $290.40 to round out the package. The Bowtie's greatest bruiser alone costs at least $988.55, more than the standard price of well over $2,800. When extra options were added, the SS 454 Chevelle could cost well over $4,000. The standard cabin had a bench seat regardless of drivetrain. When the optional bucket seats were purchased, they came with a center console. Unlike other car makers who employed the same basic dash layout in all series cars, the 1970 SS Chevelle had a different instrument panel design than the base Chevelle or Malibu models. The gauge package was located in the huge, flat-faced panel, which was copied directly from the new Monte Carlo and comprised 3 large circular gauges for the tachometer, speedometer, and clock, bordered by smaller instruments. The HVAC controls, radio, and lighter were all to the right. The SS was distinguished by an SS-badged steering wheel and an optional instrument cluster with a 6,500 RPM tachometer, but were available as optional features. Interestingly, despite the frightening performance levels, most buyers were drawn to it because of the absolute comfort it offers, and because of the fact that it could transport 5 people with ease. It also came with all of the standard comfort and convenience features, such as power steering, air conditioning, and a stereo radio, as well as the option of Strato bucket seats for enhanced sportiness. Imagine a comfortable muscle car with 500 pure, undiluted horsepower. Muscles had a golden era in the late 1970s. The 1970 Chevy Chevelle SS was a catalyst in the muscle car industry, and it helped to define today's automobile culture. Chevy installed an indigenous cowl induction system on the hood to provide this beefy engine with all the air it could handle. It came standard with the ZL2 package and featured a flapper on the inside of the hood to let more air in while at full power. This helped the 454's 4-barrel Holley carburetor get cool air. The SS 454 Chevelle's bodywork featured sculptured lines above the wheel apertures that drew the car's gaze downward. The horizontally divided, blacked-out grille was dominated by a big SS symbol in the center. Wide stereo stripes ran the length of the hood and deck lid, and cowl induction that had a vacuum-operated door at the back of the SS hood was also offered. It delivered air to the massive Holley carburetor from a high-pressure point near the bottom of the windshield. The LS6 also featured a new heavy-duty suspension system with IFS and 4-link live rear axle. It also had larger and heavier front brakes to help control this beast. All of this was done on a new A-frame platform, which was more stiff and sensitive to the massive pressures at work. The Chevy Chevelle SS could sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.1 seconds and complete the quarter mile in under 14 seconds. However, to make it more visually appealing, the LS6 option included dual chrome exhaust tips, a blackened-out front grille, a chrome rear bumper, and wheel arch moldings. Aside from that, it had SS standard features, such as squared-off headlamp bezels, rectangular taillights, and the famous two-part grille with SS engraved in chrome. Its white dual body stripes gave it even more personality. Despite the fact that this car was somewhat expensive, it was still a very unique vehicle. In fact, most muscle car fans will unanimously agree that this is one of the best, which is quite an accomplishment given the depth and range of the automotive industry. What do you think about this car? Let us know down in the comment section.